You chase the symptom, but the source of pain stays hidden in another meridian, like a whisper behind a wall. In this video, you'll learn to follow myofascial lines as if tracing a current under skin. Test remote points on the body and clock change on a 0 to 10 scale in minutes. Pain is rarely where it announces itself. It rides pathways linking knee, hip, spine, and neck into one continuous lattice you never knew you carried. Treat the wrong place and you burn time, energy, and presence, while the true knot remains untouched. Quietly pulling strings from afar, scripting symptoms with invisible hands. Leaving now means giving up a body, navigation system that your own body will validate, on the spot, no speculation. Just a measurable method and unmistakable signals you'll feel at once. Like a compass clicking north and a needle settling under your skin. What's about to be revealed isn't in ordinary videos, it's functional cartography. A living map that shows why fascia stores memory like an archive, redistributes load like a bridge, and channels referred pain along exact anatomical routes, lines and switchbacks that modern science has finally traced with clarity. Fascia is the organ no one taught you to read, yet it quietly arranges posture, tension, and the strange routes pain takes across the whole body. It doesn't merely wrap structures, it connects them, weaving 12 functional pathways, called myofascial meridians, into an internal atlas. These lines link the sole of the foot to the base of the skull, marry the psoas to the breathing dome of the diaphragm, and yoke the hip to the shoulder with exact anatomical continuity. When any point in this network shortens or locks, the whole system compensates at a distance. The knee aches because the hip tugs. The neck grows heavy because the diaphragm won't descend. The low back flares because the hamstrings refuse to yield. Eastern body traditions drew maps of energetic pathways without a scalpel, reading the river by the ripples. Western functional anatomy now shows these lines coincide with real connective tissue chains, palpable, testable, and reproducible in any body, from athlete to desk worker to elder. By releasing the correct remote point with sustained touch, low breathing, and micro-movement, you'll watch the symptom ease in real time. An involuntary sigh, warmth blooming, glide returning. The number sliding from 8 to 3 in about 90 seconds, like a sail slackening when a distant knot is loosened. The method is repeatable. The body confirms it immediately, and you recover somatic autonomy without outsourcing your own signals. What follows now lays the groundwork for why this works, and how memory inscribes itself in living tissue, shaping posture, sensation, and the stories your body keeps. The Hermetic principle of correspondence teaches that the small body mirrors the great cosmos, and fascia is the tissue where that mirror stops being an idea and becomes palpable structure you can feel under your hands. Every tension you carry, every inherited defensive pattern, every unresolved trauma arranges itself along tissue continuity like threads on a loom that redistributes load, alters form, and inscribes somatic memory along predictable routes. Fascia doesn't merely support, it actively sculpts how you inhabit presence, how you breathe under pressure, and how you take up space in the world. Your stance, your reach, your very way of meeting what arrives. Mechanotransduction reveals that this tissue converts pressure into biochemical signal. Touch becomes cellular information. Posture becomes internal chemistry. Movement becomes neural reorganization and synaptic pruning. Stephen Porges showed that states of chronic threat alter fascial tone and proprioception. The body contracts, the breath rises, gaze narrows, and the nervous system loses the ability to distinguish past from present. Myofascial release at the correct remote point deactivates alarm circuits, refines interoception, and allows the ventral branch of the vagus, the one of connection and digestion, to take the lead again. Fascia functions as a tensional web, where each point pulls the next. Loosen the right string and resonance returns to the entire instrument, pain fading like static. Finding that point requires precise anatomical tracking, reliable testing, and repeatable measures. And that is what you'll learn now. Tracking begins with a simple anatomical question: which line crosses the region that hurts, and where does it come from before it arrives there? There are 12 myofascial meridians in the body, but 4 of them cover most common symptoms, and each follows a specific, testable route you can trace with your hands, like reading Braille. The superficial posterior line runs along the back of the body. It starts on the sole of the foot, climbs the calf, passes the muscles behind the thigh, crosses the sacrum, ascends the spine, and settles at the base of the skull. When this line shortens, you may feel knee pain, low back stiffness, or heaviness at the nape, yet the true origin may be the heels or the hamstrings quietly calling the shots. The front line takes the opposite path. It runs up the front of the body, begins on the top of the foot, passes the shin, climbs the thigh, crosses the pelvis, continues through the abdomen, and concludes at the sternum. Blocks in this line show up as a knee that jams in front, an overly tilted pelvis, or a breath that won't descend, as if the diaphragm meets a ceiling it cannot pass. The deep front line is the most internal, a hidden guy wire that coordinates the body's center, pelvic floor, psoas diaphragm, and the deep muscles of the neck. When this line locks, the breath stays high and shallow, the voice turns tremulous or thin, the sternum cinches, and posture folds inward. The body loses its axis like a mast without a keel. And no strengthening drill helps, because the issue is deep timing and co-activation, not brute force. The lateral line balances left and right, holding you against gravity's sideways pull. It climbs the outer leg, threads the hip, sails along the ribs, and reaches the shoulder. If it shortens on one side, you get lateral hip pain, a shoulder that hikes, or the stubborn sense of being crooked even when you try to align, because this tether is quietly pulling the whole frame off. After identifying the meridian comes exploratory palpation. Trace the line with your fingers, moving slowly as if reading a sentence under the skin, and search for points that answer with good pain, that dense, almost pleasurable tightness that welcomes pressure and softens when you sustain it. Don't chase sharp pain or burning. Look for density, a zone that feels harder, warmer, or cooler than its neighbors, a spot where your fingertips catch a taut thread asking to be touched. These points are release portals, places where fascia has thickened, where tension has braided into a functional knot, where the body concentrated load that should have been shared. When you land on the right spot, the body speaks back. An involuntary inhale rises. The surrounding musculature melts a shade, your awareness brightens, and you feel the unmistakable click of "this is it." Before touching, mark the intensity of the original symptom on a 0 to 10 scale. 0 is total absence of pain. 10 is the maximum you can bear. Fix it in mind or write it down. Right knee, intensity 7, so you can verify change rather than guess. Now place your fingers over the remote point you identified on the line, the psoas insertion at the groin. The diaphragms rim beneath the ribs, the hamstring tendons behind the knee, the plantar fascia at the arch, and apply firm sustained pressure without sliding. Don't press until the body braces. Press until you meet dense resistance, and the first hint of softness appears, like a knot beginning to warm under your touch. Hold steady for 60 to 90 seconds while breathing low, taking air down to the solar plexus, letting the abdomen widen on the inhale and pour out slowly on the exhale. Low breathing engages deep fascial receptors, Ruffini and Pacinian corpuscles, that broadcast safety to the nervous system, quieting sympathetic drive and allowing the ventral parasympathetic to lead again. Sustained touch with descending breath is the code that tells the body, clearly and repeatedly, you can let go now, and the tissue listens. After 60 to 90 seconds of sustained pressure and low breathing, introduce micro-movements, shifts so small they're almost invisible, mere millimeters, paced like a second hand, always in the direction of the meridian. If you're releasing the psoas, let your fingers slide a whisper toward the hip. If you're on the hamstrings, drift toward the knee. If you're at the diaphragm, invite the tissue to soften and descend toward the abdomen. Don't force, ask. Invite the tissue to glide as if seeking permission for a new arrangement. And wait for the tiny yes, a melt, a warmth, a subtle easing under your fingertips. This minimal gesture is alchemical. It changes the viscosity of fascia, turning fixed resistance into plastic flow, allowing compressed structures to find room again and nerves to breathe. Fascia responds best to slow mechanical stimulus because it is thixotropic. The slower you move it, the more it yields. Rush or push and it stiffens in defense, hardening like cooling resin against the very change you're asking for. What happens at the autonomic level is deeper still. Micro-movement renegotiates the survival contract the nervous system has honored for years. Under chronic threat, the body codifies protection as posture. Muscles shorten, fascia thickens, breath climbs into the chest, and tone stays high even when no real danger is present. Sustained touch at the remote point, coupled with descending breath and invitational movement, sends a new message through the system it is safe to release. The ventral branch of the vagus takes command, shifting you from defense mode to presence mode, and the body finally permits tension to yield like frost under sun. Stephen Porges calls this somatic co-regulation, external cues of safety, steady touch, slow breath, rhythmic pacing are read by the tissues and nerves, and the internal state reorganizes to match, restoring clarity, warmth, and grounded orientation in time and space. Concrete examples make this tangible. Knee pain that won't improve with rest, stretching, or strengthening may recede when you release the psoas insertion at the groin. Because a shortened psoas tips the pelvis forward, misaligns the femur, and overloads the knee at a distance, like a door hinge torqued from the frame. You touch the psoas, breathe deeply, introduce descending micro-movement, and in roughly 90 seconds, the knee eases from 7 to 3 on the scale as the line slackens. Cervical heaviness that seems to come from bad posture can dissolve when you free the diaphragm, because a stuck diaphragm drives the breath upward, forces the neck to compensate, and the cervical region bears load that isn't its own. You release the diaphragm's edge under the ribs, the breath descends, the head floats, and the neck finally rests. Chronic low back stiffness can yield when you touch the hamstrings behind the knee, because the superficial posterior line behaves like a single rope. When the lower segment shortens, the whole line draws tight, and the low back clamps down, trying to stabilize what's misaligned below. Even stubborn lateral hip pain can shift by addressing the outer calf along the lateral line. Unwind the lower tether, and the hip stops, hiking, balance, returning from the ground up. Each release generates signals the body doesn't fake. An involuntary sigh rising from the belly, a soft surge of salivation marking parasympathetic activation, local warmth from vasodilation, a melting of tone like ice giving to water, and an immediate, testable increase in joint range. You reassess the original symptom, right knee. Now intensity 3, and the body confirms or refuses without negotiation. When you strike the correct meridian, the shift is objective, measurable, undeniable, the kind of change you can feel and see in how you stand and move. When you miss, nothing budges, so you revise the search without drama. Follow the logic of the network and keep tracing until your fingers find the master thread that loosens the knot and lets the rest unwind. Release signals are the body's unmistakable language for confirming you've found the right point, and they do not lie. The first is the spontaneous sigh, rising from the belly without your permission, deep and long, as if valves open and stored tension leaves on the exhale. It marks activation of the vagus nerve, the branch that coordinates relaxation, digestion, and social ease. Often, salivation follows a mouth that was dry, suddenly waits. An unequivocal sign that the parasympathetic system has taken the wheel and the body has stepped out of alarm mode into repair. Local warmth then blooms beneath your fingers, the result of vasodilation. Blood that was pooled in defense now circulates freely, delivering oxygen, clearing metabolites, and brightening the tissue's tone. The melting sensation is unmistakable. Muscles that felt like cable soften in seconds, like wax warming, and you feel the layered sheets of fascia yielding one by one under your touch. Finally, increased joint range seals the validation. You retest the movement that was limited: knee flexion, neck rotation, lateral spinal tilt, and notice degrees of freedom the body simply didn't have 3 minutes ago. A quiet proof that the right line was addressed and the system has reorganized around safety. When you strike the correct meridian and remote point, these signals arrive together in a quickening cascade. And the change is objective. No placebo, no suggestion, just measurable neurophysiological reorganization you can feel and verify. Miss the mark and nothing shifts. The tissue stays dense. The breath remains high. The symptom refuses to budge. That's fine. You refine the search. Test another waypoint along the line and follow the network's logic until you find the site that answers. The body does not punish error. It simply waits for the right information, like a lock quiet until the proper key turns. That is the beauty of this method. It self-validates, requires no belief, and anyone can reproduce the outcome by following the same steps, measuring before and after, and letting the tissue tell the truth. The complete protocol goes like this. First, locate the symptom and mark intensity from 0 to 10, naming it clearly so you can compare later. Second, identify which meridian crosses the symptomatic region: superficial posterior line, front line, deep front line, or lateral line, the route that best fits the map of your discomfort. Third, palpate along the line, searching for the remote point that answers with good pain, a palpable density that seems to ask for pressure and eases as you linger. Fourth, apply sustained touch for 60 to 90 seconds while breathing deeply, taking the air down to the solar plexus and letting it pour out long on the exhale, keeping the body from bracing. Fifth, introduce micro-movement in the direction of the meridian, mere millimeters. Paced slowly, inviting the tissue to glide without forcing, like coaxing a knot to loosen. Sixth, observe the release signals: sigh, salivation, warmth, melting, greater range, the body's yes, that confirms the choice. Seventh, reassess the symptom from 0 to 10 and record the change so results are measurable, not imagined. Eighth, Repeat the process daily until the pattern reorganizes and the symptom no longer returns, consolidating the new coordination so the change holds under real life. This method turns you from a passenger into a navigator, someone who reads their own body, interprets signals, trims the sails, adjusts course, and validates results in real time. It isn't a therapy dependent on others. It is somatic autonomy forged through deliberate repetition, where breath and touch become instruments and data that 0 to 10 keeps you honest. With practice patterns that once ran, you begin to loosen their grip, and coordination replaces effort. And to show the real impact of this in a life you know intimately, let the technique step off the page and into a living account, a story you will recognize as your own, told by the body as it finds its way back to ease. Janet was 56 when her left knee began to limit everything she still wanted to do. Long walks, Sunday, dancing, climbing stairs, without the pinch of fear. Physical therapy strengthened her quadriceps, but the ache remained. Anti-inflammatories smudged the edges for a few hours, and then the pain returned. Sharper, more insistent, like a bell. She spent months treating the knee itself, certain the culprit lived there, until someone mentioned myofascial meridians and the unsettling idea that pain is rarely where it appears. Skeptical but tired, Janet decided to test it. She lay on the floor in evening light, marked the knee at 8 on the scale, and began tracing the superficial posterior line with slow fingers, searching for remote density. To her surprise, she found a point behind the right hip at the hamstring insertion, opposite side. Far from the complaint that answered with good pain, a dense, ropey tightness that seemed to ask for steady pressure. She applied sustained touch for 90 seconds, breathing deep into the abdomen, then introduced descending micro-movement, just millimeters, inviting the tissue to glide rather than forcing it. About 30 seconds later, the sigh arrived on its own, deep and unbidden, as if something ancient were finally allowed to leave. Warmth climbed the thigh, a quiet bloom under her skin. The musculature softened, and the dense strand under her fingers began to yield like packed snow warming in spring. When she tested the knee again, the number had slipped to 3. Janet stood, walked the length of the room, turned, and for the first time in months, the knee didn't catch. The origin had never been the knee at all. It was the hip tugging the whole line of axis, and she understood in a flash that she'd spent months treating the echo instead of the source. What changed for Janet wasn't just the pain, it was discovering that the body speaks through networks of tissue and tone, and that she could learn the grammar, one breath, one point, one measurable shift at a time. What happened to her can happen to you now. If you seal this transformation in your own body, mark your number, find the line, follow the steps, and let the results speak. This sealing requires a marker you can track every day, something that proves reorganization has happened and remains active, a note you can verify morning and night. The first sign is the breath. It drops into the abdomen without effort, expanding the solar plexus on the inhale and pouring out long on the exhale. No snag in the chest, a quiet weight settling low. The second is the jaw. It softens, the teeth part slightly, the tongue rests on the floor of the mouth, and the old grip yields. The third is warmth at the sternum, and a sense of inner space, as if the chest had gained volume, and the collarbones drifted apart without you forcing the lungs. To anchor this state, use a repeatable signal gesture. Place your hand over the diaphragm. Add a whisper of pressure as you exhale long, letting the breath drop to the bottom of the abdomen like a stone settling in a clear well. When you notice the breath has climbed or the plexus has armored again, pause where you are, Set your hand on the abdomen, breathe low and wide, and say inwardly, the origin is not where it seems. The axis is here. Keep the jaw soft, the tongue resting, the shoulders heavy. This minimal ritual returns you to the reorganized state without drama or story, only measurable presence, the kind you can test. With this, the technique is sealed, a key you carry in your palm. And now the deeper meaning of this shift. What it changes in how you live, decide, and meet the world needs to be spoken. Pain lies about its origin, and learning to read the body as a network ends. The chronic confusion that kept you chasing the wrong symptoms for years. The aching knee is not the problem. It is a broadcast that something distant is pulling, locking, compressing, misaligning the hinge from upstream. The heavy neck is not postural weakness. It is compensation for a diaphragm that stopped descending and sent the breath and burden upward. The inflamed low back doesn't need more strengthening. It needs the entire posterior line to let go from the heels to the sacrum so the spine can ride free. Thomas Myers, the American bodyworker behind Anatomy Trains, mapped these myofascial chains with surgical clarity, and his revelation is disarmingly simple. The body works by continuity, not isolated parts. Touch the correct remote point and the distant symptom yields, because you've finally found the master thread, the quiet conductor that was coordinating the strain all along. This is not just technique. It is a return to the temple you have always inhabited but forgot to honor, a home you pass through all day without noticing its doors and altars. Maurice Merleau-Ponty wrote that the body is the vehicle of being in the world, and when that vehicle is locked in defensive patterns, presence won't settle, intention won't flow, and life becomes a constant negotiation with limitation, like driving with the brakes half on. Somatic autonomy is refusing that negotiation. It is telling the body, with touch, breath, and sustained attention, that it has permission to reorganize what was fixed in fear, to loosen the contracts it signed under duress. The nervous system responds not because you persuaded the mind, but because you offered the flesh concrete proof of safety, measurable shifts, signals that do not lie. And safety, at the autonomic level, is the door that opens everything. Creativity, bonding, courage, clarity, the quiet conditions under which a life can move forward without flinching. God did not create the body as a defective machine in need of constant external repair. He shaped an intelligent, self-regulating system that reorganizes form and function the moment it receives the right information. Fascia is part of that wisdom, living tissue that records experience, redistributes load, and holds structural coherence even under pressure, a quiet steward keeping the frame whole. When you learn to navigate this system, you are not merely relieving pain. You are reclaiming authorship of your own incarnation, stepping from passenger to partner in how your life moves. The body ceases to be an opaque mystery and becomes a legible script, and each time you track a meridian, test a point, measure the shift, and verify the response, you practice presence as a tangible act of faith. Healing begins when you stop treating the wrong pain and follow the thread that unravels the rest. The thread that has always been in your hands, waiting for touch, guidance, and the simple courage to look. If this video resonated with you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. It helps this work reach people still treating pain in the wrong place and gives the algorithm a clear signal to spread it further. I want to hear how you're applying myofascial meridian tracking in your own body, the tests you ran, the numbers that shifted, the breath that finally dropped. Write in the comments, I locate the remote origin of my pain and release the right meridian. This statement seals your commitment to real, measurable, repeatable, somatic autonomy, a promise you can verify each day with your own nervous system. Share this video with someone who has chased symptoms for years without finding the true cause. Someone who needs to learn that the body speaks through networks and that the answer has always been elsewhere, hidden along a line they never thought to trace. Send it to the friend who keeps treating the echo, not the source. And don't stop here. Click on the screen and dive into another transformative video on the channel. Because each method you learn brings you closer to the embodied presence that has always been yours by right. A steadier breath, a clearer access, a life that moves without bracing. Remember, when you find the right meridian, the body stops being an opaque mystery and becomes a measurable answer you can verify, a map you can read, not a riddle you fear. Pain lies about its origin, throwing your attention off the trail, but you now know how to follow the thread that unravels the rest. Test the shift on a scale and watch the system reorganize in real time.